Hello and welcome to Mel Make Stuff. My name is Melissa and this is episode number 12. We have a little bit of a different setup today because I am having an extreme sun situation, which I'm not complaining about since we're finally starting to come out of winter here in Central Mass. So I'm hoping I'll be able to get through what I have to show you today without too much of a bother from the sun. I hope that everyone is doing as well as you possibly can be during these times, and just know that you are very welcome here, and I'll try to give you a little bit of entertainment during these couple minutes that we have to spend together. So what do I have for you today? I have one finished object. I want to talk to you a little bit about what I'm wearing, which is an older make, but I thought it might be sort of nice to bring it out and talk a little bit about it. And then I have 3 whips. So one of them we're going to be doing some steeking together today and the initial try on. So if this didn't work out, you guys are going to see it live on this video. So first, a little bit about what I'm wearing. This is the Sorrel sweater by Wallin, and I think this might have been one of my first pandemic makes. I remember doing a lot of swatching for this for color, but also I think because all I was doing was watching the news at that time, and so it was sort of like a comfort thing. This sweater was already super popular by the time I had decided to make it. I don't do a whole lot of being on social media, and so tend to be a late adopter of things, and so there were a lot of examples out there for me to see already by the time I was choosing colors for mine, and so I was able to really study what was out there and use that to determine what type of colors to be paired with what type of mohair. The thing that I really liked about the original version of this that is shown in the pattern photos, and that obviously attracted everybody to the pattern, is that it looks like it almost glows. Like there's something about the color selection and also the way that it's photographed that's not to be dismissed. But there was something about the quality of the color of the mohair over especially this first yarn that was used in the yoke, and I really wanted to try to replicate that in my version. The thing that I think really causes that glow effect is having a dark colored mohair over a light base yarn. And so that is what I was looking for when I started choosing things out of my stash to use for this. I think I still have some leftovers from this, so let me just pull them out of the cabinet here. So these are the 4 yarns that I used for the base yarn for this sweater, and over the top of them I put a darker blue mohair. I don't think I have any of that left. It was the Shibui mohair. I'll put the colorway down below. But it matched most closely with like the darker blues in this color, so it was much darker than these 2 colors that were used in the top of the yoke. And so this is the order that I actually use these colors, from lightest to darkest. And these are just an assortment of hand-dyed yarns from my stash. I didn't buy these to go together, I just had them, some of them for many years at that point, and I just really wanted to be able to use these single skeins that were sitting around for my stash. And that's something that I like about this pattern. It's easy to sort of mix and match things and get them to blend. And so putting that dark blue mohair over the top of especially this color here, I think has given the effect in the yoke that I was going for, where you really get a lot of definition in these motifs because you have this light yarn here paired with a very dark mohair. It will tend to emphasize the motif a little bit more and like define it. Whereas if I had used a light pink mohair or lighter colored mohair, the motifs might have faded into the background, or they would have been more likely to not pop out in the way that they are here. So you can see the fit. It's pretty good. I made, I think, the 3rd size to fit. My actual bust is 35 inches. And I do like this sweater a lot. I find that the neck can be a little high. There are some short rows, but I think they occur below the yoke on the back, and it just comes up quite high. So if that's something that you like, this is for you. And if you know that you don't like anything this high up on your neck, I mean, this is quite high for a crew neck, so that's not for everybody. The other thing that I really appreciate about this sweater is the way that the fade is explained, moving between those 4 base colors. I really find that to be very effective in terms of blending the colors. And also the fact that you have the reverse stockinette side out will tend to blend a little bit more than the inside. So actually, let me show you. I'll take this off and show you the inside too. So here you can see how the colors have faded through. So, you know, color 1 ends about here, color 2, 3, and then 4. And here is the stockinette side. So this is the inside of the sweater, and you can see it's just not blended quite as well. Like, it's very apparent when that third color starts in here on the stockinette side versus the reverse stockinette side. I have to confess, I do find that it is difficult to tell which is the front and back of this sweater, and I really need to take like a little piece of yarn and sew it in the back of the neck so that I'm not constantly questioning whether I have it on frontwards or backwards. Yeah, I usually just look for the short rows on the back, which are not super easy to see, but you can see they come to a little bit of a point here. And so these short rows here are meant to raise the back of the neck. They don't do a whole lot in my opinion. Like, I could have used probably some more short rows there, but there you go. So that is the Sorrel sweater, one of my older makes from a couple years ago. The first finished object I have to show to you today is my pair of Furrow Socks. So I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about these again, but I figured I could just show you briefly since they are done. I don't have sock blockers. I don't block my socks. I am a big proponent of blocking. I mean, you guys know I love like a good mid-project block, even a couple different times. But for socks, I just don't see the need, especially since I like my socks to fit really tightly, and putting them on a blocker could potentially stretch them out. Like, I just don't, it looks nice for showing on the podcast, so maybe I should get one, but at the same time, I don't really make a whole ton of socks. Anyway, so here you can see I have done the asymmetrical toes like I talked about in the last episode, so I will link that last episode below if you want to go back and see how I did these. I have a free pattern up on Ravelry. I will also link in case you want to make these. The Ravelry version is cuff down. If you want to do toe up, which is what I did here, I verbally gave that pattern in the last episode. I have made these socks maybe 4 times now. I really like this pattern. I find that this modified garter stitch, these ridges or furrows, per the name of the pattern, keep my attention just enough. Like, they make it so that it's not a boring vanilla sock, but I also don't have to pay attention to this. And it also makes it really easy to match my 2 socks because I can count the ridges instead of trying to keep track as I go or whatever. I am one of those people who feels a certain way if one sock turns out longer than the other, so I'm always trying to figure out some way to keep track of that, but I also don't want to be counting rows on my socks. At any rate, those are the Furrow Socks, which are my only finished object this week. The first work in progress that I want to talk to you about today is the Beneath Waves vest by Johanna Kunin. I tested for Johanna last summer, and at that time I was seriously mispronouncing her name, so apologies for that. She is an extremely talented designer. So I had tested her blueberry pie sweater, which I think was her first design, and it was fantastic. It was a great experience. She's extremely detail oriented, and I really like the finished garment. I wear it a lot. She also had, I think it was her second design on the cover of one of the more recent pom-poms. She's just really a talented designer, and I'm happy to support her via doing test knitting. I'm extremely picky about who I test knit for. Like, it's got to be a very organized experience. And when I did the first test knit for her, you know, the first test knit with a designer, you sort of don't know how it's going to be, but she ran it so well and was so communicative and very, she's just super intelligent. It was great to be working with her in that way. And so when I saw her looking for testers for this vest, I was like, yeah, sign me up. This is the one I was talking about last week where I had started a couple of inches of rib and done a tubular cast on, and I am using the Blackberry Ridge Woolen Mill yarn, which is absolutely beautiful. This is a medium weight in the dark bronze colorway. It's a woolen spun yarn, and it is hand dyed in relatively small batches. They have a dye pot there that I think she said they do 10 skeins at a time. And here is how far I am. So as you can see, I'm almost done. The only thing that I have left to do is the neck ribbing, and then I'll be able to block and wear this baby, so you'll definitely see this next time I podcast. This pattern is knit bottom up, so you start with a tubular cast on, do some 2x2 rib, and then you start these panels. So we have garter stitch on the side. I am doing a version that has side shaping, so you can just barely see where I have done some increases here. There is also a straight-sided version. And then we have this pattern in the middle. So this stitch marker was marking the front, which is more clear to me now that the entire thing is almost done. And so we have this garter, lace, and bobble section. And I really love these bobbles. This is my first time doing a crochet bobble, and they are huge. I really like how much they stick out and how big they are, like especially in this very airy yarn. And I also like forming them. There's no flipping the work from front to back like you have to do with a knitted bobble sometimes. And so I think the crocheted bobble is going to be a go-to for me in the future. So you work the body in the round, and then when you get up to the armhole, whether you've done side shaping or not, you do some decreases here to shape the armhole. And then up here, there's like a little bit of a transition chart to get you to this section up here, which is stockinette for the front and for the back. So at this point you are knitting stockinette flat, just back and forth. You start knitting flat after you separate for the armholes. And the back is just slightly longer than the front, where there's a little bit more neck shaping. And I love the shaping that's here. It just creates this very graceful curve for the neck, which is going to be beautiful with a little bit of rib on it to finish it. I'm really excited to try to style this because I don't have any vests that are like this, that have that sort of traditional, more set-in sleeve shape to the armhole. Like I have sweaters that I've just not put the sleeves on, and but they were more like a drop shoulder type of thing. Like I did that with the Eula Cardigan, and I guess technically that's a vest, but it's not this sort of shape here. So I think this is going to be really cute over a dress, or maybe over like a collared shirt, something like that. So we'll see. I will definitely have this done by the next time I talk to you, and I'll maybe show you a couple different modeled looks with it on. Hopefully I can handle this color. The color is a little bit, I don't tend to go for yellows, but I think this is a little bit more caramel, and I'm hoping that I can pull this off. So that is the Beneath Waves vest by Johanna Kunin. The next whip that I have to show you is my VAIR sweater by Gudrun Johnston. This is the one from the cover of the Shetland Trader book, and this is the one that we're gonna steek together today. So let me show you the body first. I have blocked this. I did another good mid-project block. So this is another one that's knit from the bottom up. And then once you separate for the armholes, you start doing this little color work section here. There is a neck steek, which I have already cut open because I needed to do that in order to block it flat. And here are my armhole steeks that we're going to cut. The sleeves are knit in the main color, and so I am done with my contrast colors, and here is how much I have left. It's like I basically used nothing. So I could make like, 5 more of these sweaters with the same contrast colors without running out probably. But I love this yarn from Bartlett Yarns up in Maine. I use their stuff a lot, so I know that this will get used in other upcoming projects. And this is how much I have left from the first skein of my main color, which is from Green Mountain Spinnery. It is the Lana base. So you can see how far I got with one skein. My entire body is done. I'm making the second size to fit my 35-inch bust, and the sleeves are going to take up a lot of yarn. So ordinarily, by the time I have finished the body of a sweater, I'm usually about 2/3 of the way done. Your sleeves take up maybe a third, maybe a little bit more of your total yardage for a sweater typically, but these sleeves are going to be significantly more, and so right now I feel like I'm maybe about a third of the way done on this sweater, and the sleeves are just going to take me a little bit longer. So obviously I have not tried this on yet because the armhole steeks are not cut, and that is what we are going to do together right now. So let me move the camera a little bit so we can see what we're doing, and I'll be right back. So we're here at my ironing board right now because this is the only place in this entire room that's not covered in yarn and detritus, but we have 2 armhole steeks to cut right now. And so one of them is where I was doing changing my other colors during the color work section. I typically do not cut these tails off. I'll just cut right through them when I steek. I don't do anything special with these. I definitely don't weave them in because when I was doing my colorwork steek, was very careful to always change my yarns directly in the center of the steek. So if you happen to sort of brain fart on this and change your yarn either here or here, you will need to weave that in. That will cause a hole. If you are changing your yarns in the center of the steek, you don't need to weave them in, you don't need to cut them short, you don't need to do anything special. So here is what the inside of this looks like. You can see they're all probably 3-inch long tails or so. So I'm just gonna leave those as is, and they will eventually come off after I've steeked this. All right, I'm gonna start with the side where I was not doing the color changes, just for ease. I like to start with that side for my first steek. And so you can see this is a 9-stitch steek. So the outer edges of the steek are done in the main color, this dark green. So it's a little bit hard to tell that that's still part of the steek, but it is. And I originally thought like 9 stitches, God, that's a big steek. But what it enables me to do now at this point is to cut this without doing any reinforcement. So I am using very sticky woolen spun yarn. I'm not worried about this unraveling at all, even with the amount of try-on that I'm going to be doing. Blocking this before steeking has also made the fibers sort of bloom a little bit and grip each other. So I am not worried about this unraveling, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut. I'm not doing crochet reinforcement. I didn't reinforce this with my machine, anything. So let us do the first cut. I have my relatively short bladed scissors, which is my preference for doing this sort of thing. And I am putting my whole hand underneath here so that I'm sure that I'm not accidentally cutting something that's elsewhere on the sweater, like the other side of the body. That's really the main way that I think you can cause like a catastrophic issue here. Like at this point, if this doesn't fit, there's nothing I can do about it at this point. But if I were to cut through and cut a hole in the body of the garment or something like that, that is definitely harder to recover from. So I'm just going to make sure I'm cutting straight down the middle of stitch number 5, which is this main color stitch down the middle, and let us do it. The yarn tail I have up here is just from when I joined the shoulders with the 3 needle bind off. Get myself rearranged here. At this point, I'm just going to put my finger through the top of the steek. So when you're knitting up, you bind off these stitches before you join the shoulders with the 3 needle bind off, which I have already done here. So I am just going to put my finger in here. You can also steek before you join the shoulders, and that makes this a little bit easier. So armhole 1 is open. You can see it's not like this is immediately going to start unraveling or anything. Don't need to be worried about that as long as you used a sticky non-superwash yarn. This is one of the instances where using a non-superwash yarn is very good. If you were using a superwash yarn for this, which is totally also possible, you would just want to reinforce this with your machine or by hand before you do the cut. So for the other one, I am just sort of combing on the inside. I'm just combing the tails over to one side. You don't need to do this. I just find that it makes things a little more organized for me. And then I'm going to cut this one in the same way. So here you can see my beginning of round where these stitches are a little bit offset from each other. So you can see I've got tails in my hand doing something, and it doesn't matter. I'm just keeping on my cutting. And so here we are. Okay, both armhole steeks are open now. And I'm not tugging on this at all. I'm just sort of like lightly seeing which ones of these will come off by themselves and which won't. The other ones I'm going to come back and trim. Because I know that I switched all of my yarns right in the middle, I'm not worried about cutting these off sort of even with the steeked edge. Again, if you happen to join on either side of the steek, you want to leave that. You can just leave it at this point and weave it in later. All right, so there we go. Let us try this thing on. Okay, so you can see here is my neckline steek, which has already been cut. And before I cut this look just like this. You bind off some stitches for the middle of the neck and continue on with your steek. And then eventually when you cut this steek, because the shaping for the neck is so nice, it just creates this sort of crew neck, and the steek stitches themselves want to turn to the inside. So eventually I will just trim this steek a little bit and sew it down on the inside of the neck. And that will be how I deal with that. So I am being a little bit careful here just because I don't want to like traumatize these stitches any more than they need to be, but it fits, yay. Okay, now here is my stitch marker again, marking the front. I can take that off since it's obvious now. So this is perfect. I was worried that it was going to be a little bit too tight across this area. I have, like, there's not a whole lot of difference between my upper bust and my full bust. And so sometimes patterns that are meant to fit with very little ease can be a little bit tight across my upper bust. But this looks good. Right now, it actually looks a little big. But that is because there are not sleeves on there. So when I pick up for the sleeves, I'm going to be picking up on the inside of these steek stitches. So this is actually going to hit me in a great spot. I'm going to have great arm mobility with the shoulder hitting here and with the arm side hitting like right on that hinge for my arm. That's going to be perfect. And you can just sort of see how this is shaped. I did do the version with side shaping, so it comes out towards the middle of this razor shell section. Really it was this way since it's a bottom up pattern. And you can see how this hits. Depending on how big your bust is or how much emphasis you want or don't want in this area, like I have a very small bust, right, compared to my upper bust especially. And so if you are a larger busted person, you might run into an issue with this lace coming a little bit too far up on the mountaintops there. And so if that's the case, you can add more stockinette rows here. So there are a couple rows of stockinette. You can add more of those. You can continue this green or the dark, you know, your main color razor shell a little bit further. There are a lot of solutions to that. Getting a little bit more dark space in here just so that these lighter colors, if this is the way your colors happen to fall in this pattern, having these lighter colors a little bit lower might be preferable just proportion wise. The other thing is, so just in case you are new, I am rather short, so I'm 5'2". I find my body to be, like my actual torso length to be somewhat more average than that. I have a long torso for my proportions, and I did do the cropped length. So this is as written, which I think was 10 or 11 inches. And it's hitting me, it's a little bit hard to tell because I'm wearing a dark color underneath, but it is hitting me right at the high hip. So that might be another concern. If you are a tall person or you know you have an exceptionally long torso, you might want to adjust the length somewhere, either at the bottom or in this area here. So happy days. I like how this fits. It is coming up to a good point on my neck to start that turtleneck. If you're doing a turtleneck in this, you might want to be very conscious of the fact that it is going to be right up there. This yarn, for me, is next to Skin Soft. I am totally comfortable right now with my lots of bare skin under here. But for some, it might not be, especially the Bartlett is a little hairy. So you want to be cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of colorwork strands under here, and if you're sensitive to wool, this can often be a sensitive area, so just something to note. All right, costume change. Thank you for doing that with me. I've been saving that to share with you guys, and now I am excited that I can finally pick up the stitches for those sleeves and get started on the sleeve slog. Hopefully it will be okay. I'm at the point with my other projects where I need something that's going to be good Zoom meeting or TV knitting, so I think these sleeves will be perfect for that. That brings me to my last work in progress, which is the Marie Wallin Fair Isle Club number 7, the Kilim cardigan. Before I get too far into this, I have been really struggling with how to talk about this project on the podcast because it is a very inaccessible pattern. I don't just mean cost associated with doing it, although there are a lot of colors in this pattern, but the pattern itself is not sold outside of the Fair Isle Club, which has been something that's been extremely irritating to me in the past because I see previous Fair Isle Club patterns that I really want. They're just not accessible. It's part of the whole thing around this pattern. Initially, I was not planning to talk about this on the normal podcast, and I was just going to make like a special standalone video that was going to be, you know, a Project Diary style, like construction of the Kilim cardigan. But because this pattern is so inaccessible, both because of its cost and because it literally is not available on the market unless you buy her club at one point or another, I have decided to talk about it on the podcast a little bit. I didn't want to create like a separate standalone video to be glorifying this project that is really largely inaccessible. But I do think that there is still value in showing it because the construction is so interesting that I know that I'm going to learn a lot from it, and I'm hoping that by showing it to you, maybe you'll pick up something from this that will be helpful to you in your own knitting. So this is the cover of the pattern, which you get. And as you can see, this is like colorwork extreme. The construction of this pattern, as far as I can tell, is you start at the bottom and you knit this sort of back piece that wraps around the back with a steek down the middle. So you're not knitting these two panels here, that gets added on later. This piece is what you start with. You do a cast on with this mallard colorway, but eventually you're going to come back and do this rib at the end. It's not cast on at the very beginning of the project. So you knit this section up. That is how far I am right now. It's March 5th now, and I think the next sort of set of videos is supposed to be released on the 7th. So then I will start this next section, which is a grown-on style dolman sleeve. It will sort of come out from the side of the garment like this. You're still knitting color work up, and I think there's still a steek at that point. And then eventually you will come back, and this panel I believe is knitted flat. It's sort of an inset panel here, and then these panels are also knitted flat. And then there's another panel that runs down the outside of the sleeve, which you can maybe see a little bit better here. And I think there's stitches grafted together along this edge. We'll see when I get there. And here is what it is looking like so far. I have pressed this. I took a little bit of video of me pressing this. You can see what it looked like before. It was just like a rolling stockinette mess. It would have been very hard to show you if I had left it like that. So I did press this with my iron a little bit just before we started talking today. So you can see that there are a variety of colors in here, and because of the light and dark play against each other in each one of these bands of color work, it creates this sort of tile pattern, which is very satisfying to see. Again, we have the steek right here. Again, I am just leaving all my yarn tails, and I'm gonna cut this steek in the same way you saw me do the VAIR armhole steeks later on. So because I have finished this section, the last instruction for this section here was to bind off all of these stitches in here, which I find sort of interesting. But this is where eventually those inset panels that go up and down the front are going to be sewn in here. I think that's how it's constructed anyway. I'm just trying to take this one step at a time so that I don't feel rushed, and I'm liking that. That's working out for me so far. So you can see at the bottom and at the top of this piece we have this little sort of leaf motif, which is very nice. And yeah, these colors are just not in my wheelhouse. This finished object might end up going to somebody else in my life. We will see if I like wearing it, if I'm comfortable wearing all of these colors. It's really not, you know, if I were going to substitute yarn for this with Holster or Jamieson or Harrisville Designs or any sort of other typical colorwork yarn, it would be, actually it might not be so hard to substitute. 18 colors can be a little bit tricky, but because you can see the clear goal here is to have a play of light against dark. Like all of these sections tend to have either like a light purple against a dark purple background. This light color in here is sort of a greenish brown on top of a dark green background. So that is how I would sort of think about it if I were trying to substitute. And so just so you can see it on the pattern again, there is the section there. So I've gotten that far, and the next section is about to be released, so we will see how that goes. The amount of yarn that you receive in the kit is significant. There is that. I remember doing the cost breakdown per skein at the time I ordered it, because I was like, this feels like a lot of money and I just need to try to justify it in my mind somehow. Like I would, and I have bought this yarn outside of this club, and so do I feel like the price, at least per skein, is justifiable. I do remember at that time thinking like, you are getting a lot of yarn for the price, so there is that. It's not like you're being massively overcharged for the yarn because it's part of this kit. And this is the box that it comes in, which is huge. So you get the pattern, you get like a tote bag, which I haven't been using, and you get this giant bag full of all of the colors. I have just been working out of this box. Like, this box is my project bag for this. But just to give you a little view of some of the colors. So all of these individual colors are available wherever Marie Wallin's yarn is sold. So there's at least that. Like, you can buy this yarn if you want to be using it for any project, and I would recommend it. It's a little bit on the pricier side for colorwork yarns, but it is very beautiful. It's being produced by a small mill, and I like to support that in particular. So I do recommend this if it is in your budget. And if this is not in your budget, I would feel comfortable substituting this with any standard fingering weight yarn that is recommended for colorwork typically, like Jamieson's, Harrisville Designs, any of the ones that I've mentioned before. Holst, I imagine once it's washed would be relatively comparable to this. Any of those will work for any of the patterns where this yarn is recommended. The very last thing that I have to show you today is the other type of yarn that I bought from Blackberry Ridge, which arrived in the mail since we last talked. I just wanted to show this because I really want to support this mill. I think that they're doing amazing things there, and this is a very beautiful yarn. So I have 4 skeins of this. This is the Sport Silk blend. It's a sport weight 2-ply. It's 25% silk, 75% wool. This colorway is cranberry. So I have about 1,400 yards of this, and I have to figure out what to do with this. So project planning, my second hobby, is in full swing right now. I do want to use this soon. I don't know that this will be my next cast on. Again, being a late adopter of things, recently discovered the Creabea podcast, which if you somehow haven't seen, like I'm probably the last person on the planet who hasn't seen her podcast yet, but I find her projects and the way she talks about them to be very inspirational. And she was knitting a project a while ago. I actually don't even know if she finished it, but it is called the Eula Cardigan. I'm gonna go with Eula. I think it's spelled J-U-L-E. And I have been sort of wanting to make a vest version out of that. So if the Beneath Waves test knit that I'm doing, if I like wearing that vest, if I can figure out a way to style that in a way that I like, I might want to make some more vests soon. The idea of doing something without sleeves is rather appealing right now. And so that might be a cast on in the near future. I also am wanting to make a summer top. I haven't made a summer top in a little while, so that might be sort of nice. So there will be some swatching in my near future, and I will bring those to show you next time. I think that is all I have for today. So thank you so much for being here with me, and I will see you next time. Bye.